Hi everyone, clocking in for the Orphan's Tales live reading series here on a Sunday night, broadcasting. Is the word broadcasting when it's a stream? Broad streaming from a little tiny lonely island in the Atlantic Ocean. Good to see all of you. I don't know, Sunday nights are always kind of sad for me, and there's no such thing as Monday anymore. So, I don't know, it's melancholy, but I'm so glad to see all of you. It's really nice to see all of you. Turning up again. I actually think I might need glasses. I've been reading like this, and oh no, it just happened. My light just went out. Hold on, guys. Oh no. Don't know what's happened here. Well, we might have to have a big light on tonight. That may help the glasses issue. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happened. If we can fix it. There's only so many things I can do to fix it sitting here in the... there we go. Okay. Back. Blinding light. Turning it down. There we go. All right. Back in business. You can see just how not professional my little studio is by that. In that there's nothing professional about this. I'm in a little corner of my house reading to you guys and suspecting that I might actually need glasses at this point. Maybe, maybe not. But of course I can't go find that out until we're allowed to be alive again. But I'll order reading glasses from Amazon and hope for the best. It is cozy. It is cozy. I like this room a lot. I looked for this wallpaper for a long time. But yeah, so welcome. It's good to see you all. Once again, we are listening to S.J. Tucker here, the wonderful singer-songwriter who did albums based on the Orphan's Tales. You can find her at sjtucker.com and at Bandcamp under the same name. You can also subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valenti, and find me on Twitter at Cat Valenti if you didn't come here from Twitter to begin with. I'm all over the internet, and usually I'm under the name Cat Valenti. There's a tip jar in my user profile here on Instagram and one on my website at catherinemvalenti.com. You absolutely don't have to have anything to do with that tip jar if you don't want to. But if you wanted to toss the tiniest of coins into the witch's hat, it's deeply appreciated around here. Everything's tight and tough and tremulous for the future for all of us storytellers. So it's deeply appreciated. Thank you, Syed and Julie, for tipping me last night. Anybody who puts a tip in the jar, I will thank you personally on the next stream. It just means the world to us, to me, to my house. My cat likes to eat, my dog likes to eat, my kid likes to eat. So thanks terribly, terribly much. So here we are with night 8 of the Orphan's Tales. We are definitely breaking out into the larger world here. What I do remember very vividly about one of the characters that is going to be introduced tonight, is that when I went through editing for the first time, my editor Juliet just wrote "Don't do that" next to this character's tale, and what she meant was I'd been sort of writing everything in Irish dialect because I was a dork and I was 22 and I didn't know any better, and like I've been playing D&D and everything, so like obviously tavern keepers are Irish, and that's not just terrible and stereotypical and racist, and you should definitely just write their dialogue. And it was a total disaster, and she was right. But I was so embarrassed by her saying that I think it fundamentally, like, slightly altered my course as a writer and made me paranoid about all of that sort of thing. So I deeply remembered the being called up on it by my editor. That and putting unnecessary apostrophes in names. I can't help having been raised, on shitty fantasy literature, good and shitty. It's both in the same. I read plenty of good and plenty of bad, and a lot of video games and RPGs that maybe didn't, put me in the greatest of stead to avoid stereotypes. So she shamed me into being a better writer. So good for her. So that's my big Orphan's Tales memory for the evening. So let's get started. The tale of the prince and the goose continued. The fire had guttered to nothing. Light. Don't you try and be dramatic here. You need to stay on. That wasn't a cue or anything like that. Stay on. The fire had guttered to nothing, and the prince sat in darkness, staring at palms he could not see. The witch touched lightly the knotted scar on her forehead. Light, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Sorry, guys, I don't know what is going on. The witch touched lightly the knotted scar on her forehead, the line that twisted and looped like a sea serpent. All right, that's it with the light. Turn the whole light on. Sorry, we'll just have to deal with this for the evening, and I will figure out what is going on with this stupid light. Let's just start over. The fire had guttered to nothing, and the prince sat in darkness, staring at palms he could not see. The witch touched lightly the knotted scar on her forehead, the line that twisted and looped like a sea serpent. She smiled grimly, her mouth nodding upward in just the same line. The accusation lay between them on the table, fat and hideous, black-spined and full of smoke. The witch said nothing, and he tried not to look at the corpse which lay covered in soot and dew, leaning against the fireplace like new-cut wood. I didn't know, the prince whispered. I couldn't have known. How could I? She was just a bird. I didn't mean. He had ruined the only precious thing his quest had touched. The witch covered his shaking hand with hers. Her voice was soft and kind as a witch can manage. If you'd meant it, my beautiful boy, I would have eaten your liver and smiled through the meal. Prince Leander looked up at Knife with sudden passion. But there has to be a way to bring her back. There has to. You're a witch. I'm a prince. In all the books where there's a witch and a prince, there's a way. He seized the edges of the table and leaned close to the crone. Tell me how to do it and I'll save her. It is what a prince ought to do. To save maidens. I beg you, send me to the farthest ice cap, the widest swamp. But I will go if it means her life. Witch smiled, a real and tender smile as from a grown wolf to a whelp. Maybe. As you say, it is the main thing princes are good for. The witch was silent. She collected the dough from the table, flour and blood and tears and all, and slid it into the hulking oven. How did you escape from the castle? The prince asked suddenly, wary as a cat. I was banished, she replied shortly, pushing the misshapen loaf farther onto its iron grill. Leander could see the rest of the tale, piling up like fat parchment scrolls behind Knife's eyes, but just as plainly he saw that she had told him all she wished to tell. All you must know is the evil that your family has done to mine. She was the last of us, the last child of that poor girl who crouched in her tent while men butchered stars. Now she is dead. There will never be any more of us. That is a truth you can hold like a sun-baked brick in your hand. It has weight. It has heft. To save my daughter, you need no more. So there is a way. What must I do? The prince fixed her with that sincere gaze that all princes possess. The witch grunted, squinting at him through the low light. She must be wrapped in the skin of a lucrata under the new moon. Then it is possible, though not likely, that she will be restored. The witch waited for a response, but none came. Really, boy, have you never seen outside the castle walls? The lucrata is a terrible beast who lives in the dismal marshes. He is the color of clotted blood, part stag and part horse, of a size which dwarfs both, a mouth that stretches from ear to ear, and instead of teeth it has twin rows of solid bone. It is very fearsome, I assure you. I'm not afraid, cried the prince, nearly tripping over himself to show his willingness to brave any challenge to rescue the beautiful bird maiden and redeem his family name. Wait, boy, you do not understand. Let me tell you the tale of another prince who went to face the lucrata. The other prince's tale. Once upon a time, there was a handsome prince who went to rescue his innocent sister from the fell beast. The lucrata snapped his spine with one crack of his jaws and wore his head and hands on his antlers for a fortnight in celebration. The witch sat back in satisfaction. In the garden. The boy giggled. He sat primly across from the girl now, not nearly brave enough to attempt to touch her again. She laughed, too, a low, quiet sound in the dark. Her eyes drifted up through the cedar boughs, black hawks darting toward him and away again. They were nervous now, skittish and afraid of Dinarzade's thunderous steps, which surely were not far off. There was no supper to distract them, only the two, eager to tell and eager to hear, awkward and unsure, terrified of discovery. In the night which cantered toward morning like an eager mare, he inched closer to her and urged her not to stop. The girl drew her breath inward and began again, with her voice of waving willows bordering a dark lake. The tale of the prince and the goose continued. When Leander left the hut in the morning half-light, the witch gave him a knowing grimace and kissed his cheek with leathery lips. It was an awkward gesture, and he did not look her in the eye. But her hand fell to his and unwrapped the leaves from his stumps. He was not very surprised to see that they had healed over entirely, new skin, pink and warm, the fingers severed neatly at the knuckle, with no blood or scar to be seen. Grass and leaves, he said, smiling, and the witch winked. And so the prince left her, having found a quest after all. He chased its tail into the high mountains, tipped with snow like wise men's beards, and down to the sea laid before him smooth as a dress. He did not mind the difficulty of the terrain, being, after all, a soldier, though it was more tedious than he had thought a quest would be. For instance, he had not guessed how much the body of a quest was simply walking. He walked until 3 pairs of shoes were ruined, cursing his lack of a horse. He stomped over every imaginable landscape, from dank fen to pleasant farm to alpine ice. And yet no one greeted him in the villages through which he passed. No one shouted with great joy that the prince had blessed their village with his presence. What an honor to have you, sire! No one insisted he feast at their table. Only the best of the harvest for you, sire. No one begged to be regaled with a song of his adventures. Oh, do tell us of the terrible witch, sire! In fact, no one took much notice of him at all. Innkeepers were surly, tavern women taciturn and rather getting on in years, milkmaids were unfriendly, wide-calved, and attached firmly to the flanks of their cows. After a time he looked not very different from the lowest peasants, covered in grime, face sour as a priest on Tuesday, and entirely without well-made shoes. All in all, it was nothing like he had been led to expect. One evening, as the sun was counting up the day's gold in the west, Leander ducked into a seaside tavern in the north part of the country with a peculiar sign above the door, a great fist strangling a fish. He laid a few coins on the bar and rested his burning feet against the damp floor. He sucked down a bitter, watered-down ale that tasted of leather and warm bile. It was a filthy place, with dozens of dark, cowled faces peering out from what seemed like far more than four corners. At least in this he had found the tales were accurate. Disreputable strangers abounded, as numerous as whitecaps on the sea. The bartender was a great hulk of a man who looked as though some giant had simply dropped an armful of limbs into a heap. He brandished a thick rag like a sword, and the rusted iron of his eyes dared anyone to order a drink. His hair was the color of sandy shoals that trapped the hulls of ships. His hands were the size of well-wrought drums. He smelt of lamp oil and brine. He glanced at Leander under his heavy eyelids and said nothing as the young prince grimaced at his mug. He didn't mean to turn up his nose at the house brew, but the stuff was so foul his face contorted without consulting him. The bartender scowled and spat. But Leander had gotten quite tired of his brisk reception in these wretched little towns. He glared at the barkeep. "Do you know who I am?" The slab of skin behind the counter studied the wood grain of his bar. "Yes," he grunted, "but you'll not get a better ale on account of it." Prince rolled his eyes. "That's not why I asked, good sir. It is," he struggled for the right word, "fine as the water of the wells at my own house. But all I have met have been rough with me since I set out for the dismal marshes, and I have very little time to find what I seek. If only the townsfolk would be kind to me, would smile and bow and point out the way like the markers on the dusty road. But they will not. I guessed you knew me, yet you said nothing of it, nor offered yourself as helpmeet. Why?" The man shrugged. His body seemed to quake like the shifting of continents. "I know some things the common folk don't. They likely don't know you from the king's cows, and if they did..." The tavern keeper's eyes glinted like the hull of a ship in the morning light. "Your father is less than loved here. They'd like to take their taxes out of your hide if they could manage it. They'd like to take back the babies that disappear into the tower of that sorcerer. Barring that, they'd like to kill you as payment for them. I'd not stop them myself. Best if you don't make yourself known. You're awfully far from home. What does your name mean here besides foreign tyrant? Not to mention it isn't the habit of us peasants to be helping strangers. I'd rather have a dog with your pedigree, catch my meaning? And that's more words than I've said to a customer in a month, so take them well and get on your way." The abashed prince picked at his mug. He was becoming used to humility, to being shown that he was a fool. This alarmed him, of course, but this was hardly the place to show his courage and breeding. "Will you tell me at least how to find the dismal marshes? I fear I've become quite lost." And Leander gulped like a caught trout. "Is it possible you know of a cobbler with a good pair of boots to sell?" Barman glanced over the ale-stained bar to peek at the princely toes poking out of the prince's ruined shoes like worms out of a bait sack. He grunted again. "Once when I was a young man, I went to the marshes. I'll tell you the tale if it'll clear you from my chairs." The great-shouldered man straightened like a child reciting lessons, and when he spoke his tale, his voice became deep as the sounding of the sea on stone, his words lost in their slur. The prince was transfixed, for by now he had become an excellent listener. "My name is Eyvind. No reason for you to have heard it." The tavern keeper's tale. "In my younger days, I was a bear. It's nothing to gawk at. Bears are quite common in my country, which lies as far to the north as the deserts lie to the south. All my land was covered in snow and peopled with a proud tribe of pale-furred bears who governed it well and wisely. When we moved over the ice, we were like a wave that is gone before the foam touches the shore. I was one of the white bears and very happy. I loved a she-bear. She was the finest of all our fishers. She could dip a silky paw in the rushing glacier melt and seize 20 salmon at once, holding them up like a bouquet of wildflowers. Her eyes were large and dark, and they danced like the lights that often painted the night sky. She was a novice astrologer, but she could already read the stars as easily as letters. When she stood on her haunches, she was taller even than I. In the land where snow does not melt, the hours of our days were simply filled with fishing and hunting, with the rearing of cubs, with watching the stars. My people were always very great astrologers, though rarely consulted by you folk. Once in a very great while, a Versumlung was held, a congress of the bears. And so, a Versumlung was called the day I and several other young bears were to announce our chosen mates. Such things are dependent on the star motions, and the congress must be consulted. Seal fat was laid out like a glistening carpet with great slabs of salmon, pinker than a cub's paw in the first hour of life. Hundreds of white foxes had been killed in honor of the star gods, and I made a cloak of their fur for an offering. A congress of bears is something to see. The bears come across the glaciers like blocks of living ice. Their eyes flash brighter than a glimpse of seal flesh in cold water. By the time they had all arrived, the stars had already begun to shine in through the curtain of sky. I bowed before them. It always pays to be polite when one is asking a favor. Besides, I was sure they would approve of my choice. She was, after all, the pride of the land where snow does not melt. The stars whisper on their sky flow, one bear began. Bless them in their cloud hunt, I answered. All these things are ritual. No one says a word that has not been spoken 1,000 times before, 1,000 times. And even the first of those was a repetition of words that came before. At this the rest settled in, ripping into the seal flesh with great relish. After all had been eaten and were rolling back on the snow, a great woolly bear came forward. I knew him. He was called Gunda, quite the fiercest of us. The stars whisper, brother. A great horror has occurred far away to the south. The red summer fire, which is called the Harpoon Star, told me. One of his sisters murdered. A snake star, beautiful and green, and she is dead. The bears sent up a terrible howl of mourning, piercing as a bone needle. I shivered. We weep for our sky aunt. We mourn for the flesh that vanishes. It is a wicked omen. The shape of stars is confused. The signs of the black seal and the caribou beset by wolves are conjunct. The great paw is in retrograde. We have taken the augurs. You may not take a mate in this dark time, which must be a time of grief for all who love the stars. We are sorry, brothers. I howled, long and low as a buried horn. How was it right that a death in the forest could deny me my heart on the ice? I dredged the frost with my claws. Perhaps in another year, when the constellations have removed their veils of black and gray. Gunda wanted only to comfort me, but I could hear the lie in his tender growls. The stars never stop grieving. They had denied me my bride once and for all. Never would they be moved in their judgment. As we were taught long ago, the stars cannot retrace their orbits. I care nothing for the death of the serpent god. The Versumlung gasped at my blasphemy. No one but I in my rage would have dared to show a calloused paw to their names. If you will not grant me my mate, I will take her. We will travel to another sea where the snakes and stars do not command. A soft step sounded behind me. I could smell her icy fur before I could see her, those clear black eyes looking down on me with pity. No, she whispered, and her voice was like the slide of a cub's belly on the ice. Did you think I spent all my days looking down in ice? I see the sky like any bear and better than most. I saw that the sign of the fox that is hard to catch dipped below the horizon out of season, that the moon darkened like whale's blood on the glacier. Then when the hunter's knife rose in the south, I knew that the clouds were full of grief. It is not meant to be, Avent. And more, the molted antler is in the third house. You will have no mate, not now and not ever. Not I nor any other. What is written you cannot unwrite. Smile as best you can and hunt with me, fish with me, but do not ask me to your den. You can curse the stars, but I will not. Beautiful beast, choice of my heart. I wept openly in the sight of all my warriors, unable to believe that I would be not denied something so obviously fated. No, I suddenly cried, I will not smile. I will travel to the forest of the south and avenge the death of the Star Sister, the Serpent God. I will right the wrong done to her sacred flesh, and I will win the favor of the Harpoon Star, he who pierces the underfur with his light. He will give me my bride. I have fought 1,000 battles against fierce tribes of wolves, so too will I win this battle and call her my victory. My love just shook her great white head and padded heavily away across the snow. I left the rest shuffling on the ice. I went immediately. I took nothing. I did not once look up at the stars for guidance. I heard none of my brother's protests, nor my bright-tailed bear's tears falling like first snow on the frozen earth. I thought then that I knew the right path, that it stretched out before me so sure and straight that I could not help but follow it. My paws would find it easily, since this must all have been written long before. Why else would the snake god have died except to be avenged by me? As you can see, I was a very stupid bear. I journeyed south from the glaciers no one of my kind had ever left. I ate salmon from the stream. I bandaged my paws when they bled from the incessant walking. I spoke to nothing, since there was nothing to speak to. In the deep nights, I watched the mother's milk glow white against the sky, winding through the stars like unspooled thread. The world is wider than any one bear can fathom. It gobbles distance like a hungry cub. I could not, after a full cycle of the moon, understand why the land had not become the burning jungles of the southern kingdoms yet, why the sun did not glower red, why the stars had not shifted into constellations of which I had only heard legends, the scorpion, the lion, the serpent. I still moved through a landscape of cold wind and mountains like broken teeth. At this rate, my love would be a grandmother, gray in fur and tooth, before I could have her. When the moon had become full for the third time since I set out, and rode the sky like a great whale, full-finned and gleaming, the earth did abruptly change. It became wet and full of green things. Water ran freely here, in sluggish streams there, grass-colored and strung through with amber. I did not match the world any more. My white fur stood out like a tear in the green hills. Tall reeds sprang up everywhere, thin and golden, and eels snapped their long bodies in the water. I could see great copses of tamarind trees with their red roots gnarling, cypresses bruising the sky with their branches, briars and brambles like a human woman's long hair. Water birds dipped their beaks into the glistening creeks. Their feathers shined like untrammeled snow. All I had known was the pure and unbroken white of my home, the pale horizon going on forever. The dismal marshes were beyond my heart's experience. I could smell the thickness of the air, the dank smell of growing things twisting in the earth, the softness of rain and fruit on the trees. My fur rippled, both afraid and awakened. As I stood with my paws gathering mud, one of the massive water birds broke off from the flock and leapt toward me, half walking on his thready legs, half flying. He was bright green, the color of the grasses around him. Some of his feathers were such a rich shade of it they were nearly black. His eyes were flashes of sudden rainstorms. His beak curved earthward like a scimitar and quite as sharp. He was so bright I had to squint, my eyes already weary of so much color. He was clothed in the colors of the sky after the sun has fled, rimmed in light. The bird stopped up very short to me, flaring his great wings and stamping his feet. I could smell his flesh like salt fish and rich soils. "Well, I say," he said in a svelte voice, "this is an oddity. I shall have to call upon Beast at once. One does not keep such a thing to oneself. It is quite rude. Come then, don't stand there gawking like a hatchling. You may come to luncheon and discuss what exactly we are going to do with you." Spluttering, I moved to catch up with him, splashing in silt and green water up to my knees, as he was already sprinting far ahead in his peculiar half-flight across the marshes. "Wait," I called, and my voice boomed out over the swamp, scattering cicadas and kingfishers in its wake. Waiting, waiting, lady in, gentleman out, wait for water and meet the drought. The great heron sang out over his emerald shoulder and ran even faster. He was a blur of green and blue, and I could not keep up. But as I stopped, panting, fur soaked in sweat, I saw a massive, gnarled hall of tamarinds, which arched up to make a thatched roof of leaves, and the bird leaning against the doorpost. How do you hunt even the smallest mouse, Avian, really? And he ducked inside, leaving me to be stunned at the sound of my own name from this bizarre creature's mouth. A little lunch service carved from cattails and willow roots sat on a small table in a room any gentleman would be proud to call his. The tamarinds have coiled around each other to make 3 chairs and an array of cabinets, tables, and twisting staircases that vanished into a filmy mist, which hung over the room like a well-apportioned ceiling. I could not believe that I would fit in the little hall, but it seemed to suit me exactly, and as I watched, the red-tinged branches shifted and sighed to make a long ridge on which I could rest. They're so considerate, my tammies, the heron said fondly as he dipped his beak into a small cup and slurped with relish. I sank onto the fragrant bed with a heavy sigh, my muscles burning like lamp oil. Only then did I notice that we were not alone. A huge creature, the color of dried blood, stood calmly in a corner, drinking from a large bowl of oak leaves. The rear of the hall had swelled tall and wide to accommodate him. His red antlers tangled rather horribly around themselves as he slurped at his tea, and I could see that his teeth were not teeth at all, but a bright ridge of solid bone. Beast, this is the one of whom our brother spoke. Is it not thrilling he has come directly to our marsh? Yes, your majesty, the scarlet beast replied in a musical voice. His eyes twinkled with laughter like the fall of leaves on the water. We do so rarely get such august guests. Majesty, I asked, unsure of what impossible kingdom the heron could rule. Of course, I'm the Marsh King. This is Beast, who is a kind of courtier of mine, you might say. It is a sad state for a king to have but one courtier, but he is quite a good one. How kind of you, Eminence, the beast intoned, with the slightest flavor of gentle mockery in his voice. Think nothing of it, my good friend. Now we must to business, for there is not much time. I was so bewildered at this point I could say nothing at all, but I forced my tongue to work in the dry cavern of my mouth. How can you know my name? Who is this brother of which you speak? I do not understand you. Oh, no one expects you to, dear chap, the Marsh King assured me in a tenderly condescending voice. Beast winked at me with one crimson eye, and the heron continued, You keep your counsel, and the gods keep theirs. My brother is the harpoon star who came to visit us some months ago and announced your coming. Sit still, and I shall tell you of his audience. And that is where we will end for the evening. Beast is best boy. I saw a question go up earlier as to what tale I think of when I think of the Orphan's tales, and we're coming right up on one of them. All of the stuff with the Marsh King and Beast is definitely one of my favorite bits of the Orphan's tales, and something that feels very much like me from later books when I learned to do books better. And I think that we'll get to that tomorrow night. So look forward to it. It's one of my first bits of good comedy in a novel. There's very little comedy in my previous books, whether they're novels or not. It was very serious. I was very concerned about being taken seriously. One of the other ones I always think of is the Goldfish's Tale from the second book. Pretty sure it's in the second book. With the goldfish and the dragon and all that. And I mean, there was a little movie made of that. So here's a bit of trivia. There was a movie made of just that tale from the Orphan's Tales, the River Pilot's Tale, and the goldfish stuff that comes through that. It stars Ahmed Best, who you may know of as Jar Jar Binks from The Phantom Menace, who's a lovely, lovely actor. It has a lot of great puppets in it. I have a DVD of it in my bookshelf. Is it the greatest movie ever? No. Was I charmed that it was made? Yes. I don't even know if you can find it online. I have the DVD. But yes, there is a little short film that a group of puppeteers made a couple of years ago. So yeah, that exists. So yeah, I often think of that one. And I'm sure that, like, again, as we go along, things will become clearer in my memory, and I'll remember other ones, but those stick out. The City of Marrow sticks out. Taglio, obviously. The Seafaring Satyr, and that's not the name of the tale, though. That's the name of SJ's song. It's the Satyr and the Selkie. The Tale of the Satyr and the Selkie. So yeah. Can we stream it here? I don't know. I don't know how that would work. If I could, like, put it on my TV or something. We'll look into it. But yes, there is a little short film. It's weird. The puppet stuff is great, actually. It's when they put the puppets down that it's a problem. But yeah, so those are sort of the Orphan's tales that stick out to me. But my answer would be different. I'm sure will be different when I get to the end of this book and start the next one, because my memory is but we're definitely, with the Marsh King and Beast and everything, definitely getting to stuff that is I'm very, very fond of. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say something else too. So they're called the Dismal Marshes because I lived near the Dismal Marshes, which are in Virginia, when right before I moved to Japan. Right before I moved to Japan, or after? After, right when I moved back from Japan. So when I was sort of editing this, so I put that in the edit to, like, reference where I was living, because I thought, good Lord, what a depressing thing to call a place, the Dismal Marshes. It was such a strange, so very American thing. And my friend Rabbit and I had driven across the country and we called it our trip from El Dorado to the Dismal Marshes. Now, you may know that because William Gibson's username is Dismal Marsh, Great Dismal Marsh, because he was born near there. So there's that. And then there's the name of the tavern, the Fist Holding the Fish. So again, all of the little private jokes you get to put in things as a writer. It gets revealed later that it's called the Arm and Trout. The reason it's called the Arm and Trout is because I took writing classes when I was an undergrad at UC San Diego from a writer named Ray Armentrout, who maybe some of you know. I had no idea how famous she really was when I was taking classes from her. She is in her world quite famous for a school of poetry called language poetry, which kind of obfuscates that it's poetry that kind of punches meaning in the face in an alley and runs off. But I didn't know that then. I just thought her name was funny, and it sounded to me like a pub, like, come down for a pint at the Arm and Trout. So I made my Arm and Trout pub in my book. She was she gave me a hard time for fantasy genre cliches. So again, with the theme of Juliet doing that to me too, like between those two and a couple others, I was just terrified of being cliche. And I did not escape it in Orphan's Tales. There's plenty of cliches in there. But I was always trying, I still am always try so hard to get away from it. So those are the liner notes for the Orphan's Tales tonight. Does anyone have any other questions? Now that we have the bright above light on us and you can see the tiredness in my eyes. We'll have the light fixed tomorrow night, hopefully. You better not be broken. I'll get you. Well, how's Lord Byron? Byron is fine. He's waiting for me out in the living room impatiently. To join him for the rest of the evening for hardcore snuggles. He's very snuggly these days. The baby loves to lay on him, so he is interested in... I mean, when I say grown-up snuggles, that sounds awful, but he just, like, an adult human who can control themselves and not just, like, flop their head down on top of him. But, yeah, he's doing fine. The animals are pretty good. Chickens are laying eggs. The animals don't know what's going on, so they're fine. Byron is happy that I'm around at night, and he spends most of his time on my bed. There is a subway map on the wall behind me. There's several subway maps, actually. I can show you tomorrow night. There's from a number of cities. There's 4 of them on the wall. So we've got Tokyo down here. We've got London. We've got St. Petersburg. We've got Melbourne. And New York up on top. So there's 5 of them, actually. This is, we call this the train room. It's got little bits and pieces of palimpsest fan art in it. Those of you who have read palimpsest may know that there's a lot of train imagery and train motifs and actual living sentient trains in it. So there's like a train station sign that says next stop Colophon Station and various things, and there's the chairs in here look kind of like train chairs, and so we kind of decorated it to look like a train car. It's such a strange little room. Like if we were doing an old school MTV Cribs thing, like you'd see that it's just this weird little antechamber off of the downstairs bathroom that is not big enough to be anything. So we just put train stuff all over it because it has 5 outlets for a room that is, I mean, maybe 6 feet by 3 feet. It's such a strange, tiny little room, but for now, it is the Orphan Tale studio. I have no idea why it was built or what purpose it was meant to serve. There's windows all over it, so it's cold in here all the time. I literally have a blanket on because I'm always freezing in here. It's a very strange little room, but it is serving its purpose for you guys. But yeah, there's all kinds of subway maps up there. Yeah, well. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valenti. You can follow me on Twitter at Cat Valenti. You can find S.J. Tucker, who's done wonderful music based on these books, at sjtucker.com and on Bandcamp. And if you want to put something in the tip jar, here my user profile on Instagram or on my website at catherinevalenti.com. I would deeply, deeply appreciate it, and will thank you on the next stream. I swear there was something else that I meant to say, but I don't remember what it is. Yeah, well, maybe we'll do an MTV Cribs, like when the house is not covered with toddler detritus, perhaps. We will take you around and you can see what a cluttered hobbit house I have, but it's my clutter. It's fine. It's not hoarding. It's a hobbit. I feel justified in my my hoarding behavior. Yeah, so we'll see you tomorrow at 8:30 Eastern Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope that you're enjoying this as much as I am, and definitely one of my favorite bits is tomorrow night, so don't miss it. Tell your friends. We'll see you there. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.